which already in our discussions has been interesting, because there's a wide spectrum of people who've said to me, "Oh, Isaiah, fantastic, glad we're doing Isaiah." And when he'd given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat, this is my body."
So we were there in the morning, and then it's very quiet. It's very much like yours.
This week we're looking at Isaiah. Now I have to admit to not knowing very much about Isaiah before we had our planning meeting. And it's quite amazing actually. It's one of the longest books in the Bible.
God said to Isaiah, you have no idea what's in here, have you? Who will I send and who will go? What? There's not a snail. Well, I'm going to give you, dear friends, thank you for volunteering. In the spirit of God's call to Isaiah, I'm giving you one of these, and I would like you with this, please, to clean the church floor. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Yes, not too bad, how are you? All right, thank you. Keep going,
But we maybe think a little bit outside the box. We're thinking about the beginning of Isaiah at the moment. We're thinking about Isaiah 5 and Isaiah 6. And we're thinking about how Isaiah was a messenger telling the people what God wanted them to hear. He had got for injustice. And all he could hear were cries for mercy. He needed to get this message across. How could he do it? He didn't have the tweets. Thank you. He didn't have Facebook or the internet in any way. He didn't even have newspapers that he could publish a big advert. What we're going to be thinking about today is how will we get that message across?
Which is good.
First verse is, I will speak out for those who have no voices. The second verse is, I will speak out for those who have no choices. And so the third verse is, I will speak out for those who have no Rolls Royces.
To say a prayer to thank God for the health of all my children.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
Right, give him thanks and praise.
He was inspired by the poetry of Isaiah. Things that Isaiah had written 700 years earlier inspired Jesus to see that the ideal servant of God would take the sin of Israel on himself. Jesus then gave thanks for the wine. He took the cup and he gave it to them and he said, "This is my blood poured out for you for the forgiveness of sin. Do this in remembrance of me." This is his story. This is our story.
I'm just going to... No, I'm not hungry. Why are you taking a picture of my shoes?
No, I'm not taking your shoes. Okay.
One of the things that made us move in this direction was a Sunday when I was told by somebody that they had arrived, they'd got up, they got their kids dressed, they got in the car, they'd driven over to the church, they'd pulled up in the car parking lot outside, looked at their watches, saw they were 5 minutes late and drove home again. And I thought, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. If you go to the supermarket, they don't say you have to be here at 11 o'clock and get your shopping done by 12 o'clock. We live in a world where almost everything you can go in when you want, you can come out when you want. And why not do that for church? When you have people around for a meal, you can do it one of two ways. You can have a set menu, and you can sit everybody down at the same time, and you can give them their first course and their main course and their dessert, and they get what they're given, and it starts at a set time, it ends at a set time. What we've done really is move the whole thing to a buffet. And when you have a buffet, then you leave it up to people to make their own decision about what a balanced diet is. They've got to make their own decision about how much vegetable and how much protein and how much carbohydrate they have. And actually people can do that because your natural hunger leads you to a balanced diet. And I think spiritually, actually, we don't need to spoon feed people, we don't need to patronize them. People will naturally get what it is that they need. What we did was we took the three services. We had a traditional early morning service, then what was known as the main service, and then there was the slightly nutty late morning service for people who like that kind of thing. And people looked up and down their noses at each other about that for different reasons. Took the whole thing apart, mentally laid all the details out and thought, how can we restructure this so that it works in half-hour sections, and people, if they come at roughly the same time, will get roughly the same thing. And began to see how it could be broken down into a more of a singing time, more of a learning time, more of a liturgical time, and separate those out as different segments. Well, half hour seemed sensible, that for things to start on the hour or the half hour was fairly straightforward. And wanted to get a balance, wanted there to be, if you came for an hour, you would get a bit of teaching, and you would get a communion if you wanted one. So just laid it out and spaced it out with interactive times. It's hard to describe briefly, but to see that there was a balance and a flow to each of those sections, that it had a sense of its own identity, but also fitted together with other things. So if you came for an hour and a half, you would get pretty much all the units of a standard Anglican experience, if that's what you want. Because I think one of the things is that if you go to a traditional Anglican communion service, then there are various things you have. You have a confession, you have a creed, you have some intercessions, you have some teaching, you have some Bible readings, you have a Eucharist, you have all these units. So to separate those units out and say, well, what needs to go where, and how can we distribute it equally? We did quite a lot of sort of market research, in effect, saying to people, what matters? What are the things that you would really be sad to lose, and what are the things that you're happy to see go? And that was quite surprising. Some of the things that I would have expected to stay were seen to be disposable, other things that seemed to be important. So we made a point of keeping that. The prayers that people really, really valued, we'll keep in. The prayers that they didn't really value, never really engaged with, will drop out. And gradually we pieced together, like a jigsaw really, we pieced it together. We timed everything. I had people sitting with stopwatches on the back pew during things. I said, I need to know, how long does the creed last exactly when we say it? How long does the Eucharistic prayer last? How long does the communion distribute? Laid it all out so that it fitted into 25 minutes all the way around. So it was an intriguing logistical exercise, and we managed over the course of some months to come up with a scheme and a schedule which wouldn't be too hurried, would go like a slalom course, go through all the necessary gates. So that's the construction. There was also a whole other thing of communicating it and getting people to a point where they trusted it. It's been a journey. It has been remarkably easy. When we introduced it, we put a lot of effort into informing people and including them and consulting them. We spent a year from the initial conception of what seemed like a crazy idea to actually making it happen, and put a lot of effort into different kinds of communications, leaflets, booklets, discussion groups, and we gradually transferred the thing. Initially we talked all in the old terms, so we had the ministry of the word and all that kind of stuff, and then when we'd established the new pattern in people's minds with the old words, we then took all the old words out and put new words in, so it kind of made a bit more sense. So that process of getting people ready for it and assuring them it wasn't going to be terrifying, assuring them that they would still get the experience that they were familiar to, that they valued. And then we launched, we had our launch week. I was pretty nervous, but people loved it. And it's so obviously easier if it doesn't matter when you arrive and when you go. And I don't think there's anybody at St John's who would go back or see any point in going back. You know, it's a bit like, you know, when you got yourself a bicycle, why on earth would you want to walk when you can go there so much faster and more efficiently and more enjoyably? It's been very straightforward, and people like it. And I think they like the positive feedback they get from other friends and contacts about it. People see it as being approachable and unfussy. It gives the church a good reputation, and people like that. They feel good about it. One of the things that I noted some years ago now was that we had this great big monolith, which was our main mid-morning service. That was the parish communion. That was the one that lots of people came to. And then we had this little thing, which was the 8 o'clock traditional communion for people, for the strange people who like the Book of Common Prayer, who like these and thous and all that kind of stuff. So they're odd. They're perceived to be odd by the others. And then there was the wild and wackies who came in the late morning for the all-age one and did bizarre things. But the power was with this central congregation. They had the greatest representation on the church council, and the church therefore was ordered around their needs. And that was a problem, I think, because it didn't respect the different ways of doing it. And what we discovered by moving to this program system is that now people aren't part of one tribe, but they're all part of the same thing. They're not part of one tribe, but they're all part of the same thing. And those who come in the morning are the people who started off. They're the ones who take the first slices of bread out of the loaf, which will be feeding our communions all the way through to and including lunchtime. And so that sense of being separate communities broke. And there are people who overlap. There are people whose hour and a half with us overlaps one section. So it's given it a unity, and that you can sense that unity in the community. That's good. What I thought would be the main benefit was that it would make it easier for people to come and that attendance would go up. That hasn't really happened. Other things have happened instead. One thing is that all the people who used to be late now aren't late, and they feel more part of the community, whereas previously they felt marginalised, so that was good. One of the things is that people don't complain any longer, because if they do complain, the answer is, well, don't come to that bit. You know, if you don't like the modern worship songs, don't come to the section with the modern worship songs. If you don't want to sing, don't come to a singing bit. But maybe a more surprising discovery from it was that what we'd done is given people responsibility for their own faith. And I think previously the unwritten message was, we the church know what's right for you. We know what you need. We know that you need this. You need a confession. You need scripture. You need the gospel. You need a communion. We're telling you what you need, and we expect you to come along and have what we've decided is good for you. And what we're saying through this is, you decide. You decide if you need a sermon or not. You decide if you need communion or not. And getting people to take that very simple, basic decision, taking responsibility for their own nurture, has been fantastic. And the result has been people exist in the church as adults rather than as children. I'm not talking about the grown-ups here. And I think that's one of the curses of traditional churches. It treats people like children. One of the anxieties in saying to people, you can come when you want, you go when you like, is, will people make a noise? I think we're fortunate that our building absorbs quite a lot of sound. Not all church buildings do that. Some churches it would be very disruptive. But we've got a building by its layout and its design where people can wander around and it doesn't really interrupt too much. And you know, people can go to the toilet, they can take children to the toilet without having to walk up and down the middle. They can walk around the edge. And gradually people have become tolerant to noise. I mean, in life there's plenty of noise. When I'm talking to you now, there's cars going past, but I don't get excited about that. And I think we can tune out to things if we know it's okay. And I suppose one of the things that's happened in St. John's is how I react to children, you know, being children in the church, gives people a lead as to how they're going to react to it. So that if I can carry on largely unfazed, then that's all right. If a child comes up to me, as sometimes happens, starts pulling on my hand while I'm preaching, if I can cope with that, then they can cope with that. And so gradually the culture has changed to it being a place where children can be children and people don't have to feel anxious about bringing their children, because the problem isn't the kids, the problem's the parents. And the parents feel mortified if their child interrupts. So the culture has just gradually shifted. I don't know how you can make that happen in a hurry. If you want children and like children and are happy to have them crawling around at your feet. I mean, today, I don't know whether you've caught this on film, today I was taking a baptism and there was a small boy with a toothbrush cleaning the carpet by my feet. And he was still carrying on something that we'd been talking about half an hour ago. But it didn't matter. And because it didn't matter, it didn't matter. One of the things that we wanted to achieve was that a Sunday would have a theme that ran through the whole thing. So if you came at 8 o'clock and stayed all the way through to 1 o'clock, that it would have a coherence to it. But also, if you came at 8 o'clock and stayed through to 1 o'clock, that you wouldn't hear the same thing twice. And learning-wise, that's been really interesting, because what people get are different perspectives on one issue. In the old system, you would get one person preaching, so you would get one insight. But if you've got 2 or 3 people during your time at church saying a bit about today's theme, you get different insights, different perspectives. And if one person's way of doing it doesn't work for you, another person's might do. Or one person might get you thinking and the next person might allow you to continue that thinking. So the depth of engagement has increased enormously through doing it in this modular fashion. And the other thing which is key to that is how we prepare it. We have a theme for each month, and then each Sunday of the month has its own planning team. So the first, second, third, fourth, fifth Sunday has a planning team. They then meet a couple of weeks before they're on, and they look at the short list of readings, and I write notes for them, briefing notes, background notes, explanatory notes, and they read their passages, they have a discussion about the theme, and they choose which passages they want to go with. They choose which passages are going to be used at which part of the morning, and they begin to explore how they are going to explore that theme in their own section. So that will be normally 4 or 5 people who are leading a part of the worship during the course of the day. We'll all meet together, spend an evening together, look at scripture together, express the theme together, make plans together. They then go away and do the rest of their planning on their own, and it comes back. So it means that everybody's sort of singing off the same song sheet. It gives the whole thing a coherence. And in today's worship, you would have heard Barbara on more than one occasion referring to the planning meeting. And in some ways, I think, those planning meetings are the church. And the Sunday morning worship is that which enables the church to exist. If you compare that to Jesus' ministry, you've got him alone with his disciples, and you've got him with the wider crowd. And when he's with the wider crowd, he's using that as an opportunity to further challenge and train his disciples. And I don't want to be too smug and I'm like Jesus-y about it, because I'm not. But I think there's a sort of fundamental model there that training people up in ministry is the most important thing. That's how the church grows and multiplies. And the Sunday morning programme is great because it lets us do that. Initially, when the previous bishop first started encouraging lay people to do more stuff, he set up a system, because technically in the Church of England the bishop is responsible for the worship leading and the preaching also. To be honest, I don't understand it, but because it's sort of the bishop's responsibility, he set up a system where people would go on quite a long training course, a year, 2 years, a sort of Wednesday evening training, and they could then be commissioned to do something. So we did that, and we had some people trained, and the training gave the rest of the congregation confidence, and that was important, that we're confident that these people are allowed to do it. But what they soon discovered is these lay people did a better job of it than I did, because they were talking about real life issues, or because when it came to leading the singing, I used to make it up as I went along, but they were planning it. And so quite quickly, because it was done well, people valued the lay input, as much as, or on occasions more than they valued my input. So that was good. And so we had more of these commission ministers, and we got them trained. And when we went to this pattern, suddenly there was a huge mushroom cloud, an expansion of lay people doing stuff. And the bishop wrote to me and said that anybody who is leading worship regularly, anybody who's teaching regularly, really should have a bishop's commission. And I said, that's fine, I'll send you a list of 30 people. And he sent a letter back saying, oh, maybe we really need to think about this. So we had a conversation. And what we came to, which in the end was his suggestion, was, well, hang on, what more is needed to commission a Christian person to ministry than baptism? So that's the understanding that we work on, is that baptism is in itself a commission to ministry, and anybody who's baptised is up to it. We've kind of we've grown through a system, and I think there are other churches who they're earlier on in that growth process. And there was a time when the bishop's permission and the training course were important. They're not now, because people learn from each other and people get the pattern of involvement. They learn now by seeing other people doing it. What we used to do, we always had a communion at the beginning, always had a communion at the end, and in the middle it was a communion on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th Sundays of the month, but the first Sunday of the month was a baptism. So we've just carried on that. But then baptism is a sacrament as much as communion is a sacrament, so that seemed fine. If we don't have a baptism, then we have a less formal communion. So which you haven't seen, the normal mid-morning communion, people stand in a semicircle around the altar, and we go along and give them bread and wine, or some of them kneel, some of them stand. On the first Sunday of the month, there's no baptism. Then everybody just comes, and we have a sort of free-for-all, help yourself. So we have a basket of bread and a tray of little glasses, and the rule of engagement is look after each other, which I love. It's just people mob up, and I don't, I stand back, and I say, look after each other, love each other, make sure nobody goes without. And I think that's what communion is all about, really.